Enter to win a new Surfskate every month at surfskate.love/giveaway. The SpiceSkate OctoSurf Surfskate truck is version 2 of their original Octo. SpiceSkate has made some improvements to it and fixed the main issues I had with the original Octo. But at a price of $239 for the truck system or $519 for a complete model, is it worth it? That's the question I'll try to answer for you in this review. Let me start with the bottom line up front. The SpiceSkate OctoSurf feels fantastic. It has very smooth rail-to-rail transfer and very high rebound. To me, it feels kind of like a combination of the Yaomeraki and the Smoothstar Thruster D. I believe it's best used for bowl and transition riding by surfers for surf training. And as a non-surfer, this is probably a stupid thing for me to say, but just based on how it feels and my experience in talking with surfers, to me it feels like if you're a surfer who rides shortboards in particular, you might really appreciate the OctoSurf. I love how the SpiceSkate OctoSurf feels and performs. As I said, to me it feels like a combination of the Yaomeraki and the Smoothstar Thruster D. Like the Smoothstar Thruster D, it has less rail-to-rail lean than the Yaomeraki and more fluid side-to-side motion. But unlike the Thruster D, it has the quicker, snappier rebound of the Yaomeraki. It's designed specifically for bull riding, pump tracks, and wave ramps. And personally, I think it's best used as a bull riding surf trainer for surfers. And because it eliminates those issues that I had with the original Octo, I do include it on my list of the best surf skates. In terms of feel and performance, it actually probably belongs more in the hybrid category. And that's because it feels both loose, fluid, and smooth, and tight and snappy, similar to the Yaomeraki. And it also generates more forward momentum than pure surf trainers. However, I categorize it as a pure surf trainer. That's because I think its highest and best use is for bowl and transition riding to train for surfing. As a non-surfer, I personally don't really find much of a use for the OctoSurf, and that's simply that I just don't need the higher performance. Anything I want to do on a surf skate, I can get from cheaper trucks. However, if I were a surfer, I would definitely want to at least try out the OctoSurf and see how it compares to other surf trainers. The OctoSurf also isn't great in terms of weight. The OctoSurf with the TKP weighs 2 pounds, 4.6 ounces, and that makes it heavier than all of the other top surfskate trucks except for the SpiceSkate Spice Pilot. For comparison, on the lightest side, you have the old Carver CX that weighs 15 ounces, and the new Carver CX with the hollow kingpin and axles weighs 14 ounces. In terms of wheelbase offset, the OctoSurf is not great. Relative to the Carver C7, which I use as my baseline, it has a 2-inch wheelbase offset. That means that when you align your bolt holes, your axle on an OctoSurf is going to hang back 2 inches behind the axle on a Carver C7. And the reason why that matters is because on a surf skate truck, if you have your foot in front of the axle, you increase your likelihood of jackknifing that truck. So you really want to be weighted on or behind that axle, and so that means that on a Carver C7 I can ride with my foot clear up on these bolt holes and I'm over that axle, but on an OctoSurf I'm going to want to be riding about here so that my foot is more over that axle so I don't jackknife that truck. And so this means that you want to have a 2-inch wider wheelbase on an OctoSurf as compared to a Carver C7 model to accommodate your same stance width. So I had an interesting experience with this OctoSurf when I took it into the bowl. I've been bull riding for a couple years now, and I've been using primarily a Carver CX for bull riding. So when I switched from my Carver CX to this OctoSurf, I initially had a bit of a hard time getting used to it. And then after getting used to it, I went back to a Carver CX and watch what happens.
Wow, that was fascinating.
And yes, it's funny and have a laugh on me, but the reason why I said it was fascinating is because I had a much easier time adjusting from the stiffer trucks to the looser trucks than I did going back from the looser trucks to the stiffer trucks. So what you're seeing there happening there is I came off of the wall at the wrong angle, and I was so used to the OctoSurf being so easy to adjust and pull that front over that I tried to do the same thing on that CX, and when I tried to pull the front over, my back wheels just immediately slid out because it was too stiff for that pressure that I was putting on it. And the reason why I bring this up is to say that if you're more of like a beginner or intermediate rider like me, you certainly can use this OctoSurf in the bowl, and as I experienced, it's actually going to be easier for you to get used to this one coming from a stiffer, say CX, than it is to go from the looser back to the stiffer. And on a related note, another point I would make is that I think that this is suitable for all skill levels, beginner to advanced. I think that intermediate to advanced surfers are going to appreciate it the most, but this is comparatively a stable feeling surf skate truck, so it's great for beginners to learn on. And you know my skill level, and so you saw me pick it up in the bowl in one session. So if you're a beginner to an intermediate rider, you can even ride it in the bowl. It's just all about what you're used to, and it just takes practice. So again, what you have here is a very functional and very versatile surf skate truck that in terms of feel and performance is more of a hybrid, because you can certainly pump this for longer distances, at least a lot better than say a Smooth Star or a Curve board. But in my view, it's more of a highly specialized truck for more specific uses. And as I said, to me, what I feel is the highest and best use for this is bull riding for surfers. So I'm going to take this truck apart and show you what it looks like inside. But first I wanted to just show you some visual differences that you'll see between the original Octo and the new OctoSurf. What you'll see visually is that they have these things on the sides where you have to loosen these bolts in order to take the capsule out. They used to have those internal in the original Octo, and now they've got these things on the exterior of the housing that you have to undo that serves the same function. So the first thing we got to do to take this apart is loosen these bolts on the sides. Then that will allow these to move like so, and that is releasing the capsule inside there. Now we'll remove the kingpin nut, and we lift this off, and you're going to find a set of washers and bearings up top here, and you've got washers that are stuck inside there. I'm going to leave those in there. So that's what that piece looks like. And then inside here you have this crazy looking capsule, and they call it the Octo, meaning 8, because you have 8 springs around in this capsule. So this functions by moving back and forth on these tension springs like so. And SpiceSkate offers 3 different capsules that are different tensions, and that's what makes it adjustable, is by swapping out the capsules. So I've had this gold in because this is, I think, the highest tension, and this is what I prefer. This red one is softer, and so if you're a lighter rider, you might want one of those other ones, but for me, I go with the gold capsule. And then I should also point out that you also have a set of washers and bearings in there. So now to put this together, it's kind of tricky, but what we got to do is, you can see that we have instructions here, and you can see on the bottom here we've got these things that are going to stick into the holes there. One thing that you got to be aware of that I discovered in the process is that sometimes this washer will stick up in there, and if you don't have that on there, the spacing's not right, so it's not going to work. So you got to make sure that you've got all of your washers and bearings in there, and they're not stuck onto that capsule. So what we got to do here is make these arrows here align with those holes there. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to lift these side pieces up to enable that to slide, and then we're going to put this down like this, and then we turn it like so to lock that in place. And now these side pieces are going to be what locks that capsule into place. So now our capsule is locked into place, and now this top piece will go over, followed by washers and bearings and our kingpin nut. That's it. The OctoSurf fixes the 2 main issues I had with the original Octo, and that is that 1, it has a clicking noise on rail-to-rail transfer, and 2 is it has a slight buckling sensation at the extreme edges of turns. In contrast, the OctoSurf is quiet and smooth with no buckling sensation, and it's a remarkable improvement. I do not include the original Octo on my list of the top surf skate trucks. However, I do include the new and improved OctoSurf on the list, and I categorize it as a pure surf trainer for surfers. SpiceSkate's pricing model on the OctoSurf doesn't make sense to me. You can get a complete truck system for $239 US. This includes the front surf adapter with 1 capsule, 2 TKP trucks, a riser for the rear, and hardware. A complete model costs $519. So this means that SpiceGate is saying that the deck, wheels, and bearings are worth $280, which comparatively feels excessive to me. So personally, if I wanted to buy an Octosurf, I would not buy a complete model. I would just buy the truck set and put it on my own deck. And that's especially true because I'm not a fan of SpiceGate's decks, as I'll walk you through. SpiceGate offers 3 complete models for their Octo, and they're the 3 that look like this. And I'm going to just tell you immediately that I am not a fan of either of these 2. And I'm going to recommend that if you get an Octo Complete, get the one that looks like this. Reason being is I just think this is just so much a better foot placement. So if you look at this one, you can see this is how my feet sit on this one, and this is a really good feeling deck. And so you can see my front foot placement on this. I've really got good wide foot placement on both front and rear. I've got great concave. This is a really great feeling deck. But when you look on the foot placement of this one, it's a different story. And this one is misleading because when you look on the specs on the website, it's going to tell you that it's 10 inches wide. But that's only 10 inches wide right about here, which is where neither of your feet go. So you can see how on both of my front and back feet, my toes and heels are hanging off. So SpiceGate, if you're watching, you know that it's all love and you know that my intention is to help you out, but it's really not rocket science here. For a Surfskate deck, I want good wide foot placement where both my front and back foot goes. So it never makes sense to me to see decks that taper off so sharply and eliminate all of that space for your toe and heel. And on this model, I have the same issue with the other one with the foot placement. This is just not good foot placement for me. I want wider where my feet go, and also this one is very flat, doesn't have much concave at all to it, and so I'm just not a fan of either of these models. So here's my final conclusion on the Octosurf. I love how the Octosurf feels and performs. I think it rivals some of the best Surfskate trucks on the market. However, I personally can't say that I like it that much more to justify the increased price. But I say that as a non-surfer. If you are a surfer who's looking for that closest feel to being on water, you might disagree. So if you're a non-surfer, I would recommend a lot of other trucks before the Octosurf. And for me, that would be the Carver CX, Carver C7, Yaomeraki, and Waterborne Surf Adapter at the top of the list. If you're a surfer, I think the Octosurf provides a distinct enough feel and high enough performance to warrant serious consideration. And in fact, you're going to hear from my team rider Ace Allen, a longtime surfer who loves the Octosurf. And as I've said, I think surfers who ride shortboards in particular will appreciate the Octosurf. If I wanted to add the Octosurf to my quiver, I would not buy a complete model. I would just buy the truck separately, and then I would build my own model with my own deck, wheels, and bearings. And if I did want a complete Octosurf model, I would definitely choose the 852 model over the other models. So that's my take on the Octosurf, and with all that said, let's hear from my team rider Ace Allen, who's going to give us his perspective as a surfer.
What do you like most about the Octosurf system? So I've been riding the Octosurf for some time, and I really like the feel of the Octosurf. It gives me one of the best feelings for surf training. It's nice, loose, and has a great spring tension. How do you feel the Octosurf truck replicates the feel of surfing? I think the Octosurf is one of the best at replicating the feel of a surfboard in the water, and that's because you can really lean the board and get that feeling of putting a surfboard on rail. And it does this easily and very smoothly without any hitches or feelings of the truck suddenly folding. Where would you rank the Octosurf among the top Surfskate trucks for pure surf training? I'd put the Octosurf right up at the top. On most days, it's the one that I reach for first, and I really enjoy it a lot. Octosurf versus Yaomeraki, which do you prefer and why? For surf training, I prefer the Octosurf over the Yaomeraki, but for cruising and multi-purpose use, I think the Yaomeraki is really nice because it's more stable when kick pushing. Versus the Smoothstar Thruster D. The Thruster D is a better all-arounder due to the ease of adjustability, which you really don't have with the Octosurf, unless you swap that inner capsule, and that's a bit of a messy process. For surf training, the Octosurf can lean deeper and definitely carve tighter. Versus the Carver C7, the Octosurf has a much closer feeling to surfing, and I prefer it overall. Versus the Spice-Skate Type X. The Octosurf. I prefer the Octosurf over the Spice-Skate Type X, again, because it just leans deeper and has a more loose, more surfy feel to it. I'd recommend the Octosurf to surfers wanting to train specifically for surfing. It achieves this task really well, but maybe it's not the best for other things like cruising or doing tricks. How well does the Octosurf work for bowl riding? The Octosurf actually works really well in the bowl and on wave ramps. The problem I see is with its durability. My Octosurf has taken some hits to the front, and that has dented the casing. I could see this becoming an issue where the springs on the inside capsule start to rub against that dented casing and cause problems. So I think it works very well for pumping and carving on flat land. I really love using the Octosurf on a moderately sloped bank to practice surfing maneuvers and to train for that surf. Does the Octosurf feel adaptable for different riding styles? I don't think so. I don't think the Octosurf feels very adaptable to very different riding styles. I think it's a board with a very specific use case, and that would be surf training, and it does that probably better than most. Is there anything you don't like about your Octosurf? Either just the truck or anything about the complete model. So as far as what I don't like, again, I question the durability of the truck. It's taken a few hits on the wooden wave ramp that have dented the front casing, and bigger dents would most likely rub that casing against the little springs on the inside and cause some problems.